How old?
1.74, young 75.
So tell me. Yes, 74. So when you got the information that persons were going to come to your house to kill you, when questions were asked about this guitar case, were your children then, had your children then been born?
Yes, they were young.
And
just before I left this country, I stayed. Yes. It was closer to 1980.
okay, so let me ask you, when you left your house that evening and left your brother there,
Yes.
did your children remain in the house?
They were not with me that time, they were with their grandmother.
Thank you. When you asked your brother to stay at the house, sir, did you consider that he would be in any danger, that he would be in any danger?
No, no.
Thank you. Thank you. Did you, sir, attend the funeral of Dr. Walter Rodney?
What I can recall, and not taking that as we put on paper this, the very day I was released by the CIA when they couldn't get the evidence to decide we will kill you if you get off the land.
Yeah, I think you meant
CIA. That same day when I came out, there was a big procession, and I joined the procession.
So you never get a chance to look at the body or face of Dr.
No, never.
So you can't assist us with how the space was after that explosion. Thank you. So the evidence you have given here indicates that you seem to be of the view that your rights were trampled on by state agencies, particularly in relation to your arrest and detention. Am I correct?
Yes.
That being so, did you ever take action against government in terms of a court action, a claim, or a suit? Did you file a claim for compensation?
Then the Education Ministry claimed that they cannot find my credentials. The minister then was Ms. Shirley Field Whitley, and I went to the ombudsman. I took her, and I can't remember who else, maybe it was the chief education officer, but I went to the ombudsman and they reported to them.
Do you know if between 78 and 79 there was an ombudsman? You may or may not be able to say.
No.
No means no, there was none, or no, you don't know if there was.
I don't know if there's
Okay, thank you. We can explore that otherwise. But you never attempted to take any action, whether through the courts or through the ombudsman, after you were beaten up and detained by the police, according to your evidence.
No.
Is there a reason why not?
What the condition of the country at the time, that it would be a waste of time to go and make a report to the police. It would be a waste of time to really say that you try to get justice through the judicial system. It was one of the situations that you will find in countries that are run by dictators.
So that was your state of mind, why you did not seek redress. Now tell me, and I'm again sorry to be so intrusive, but you did indicate that you are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah.
May I inquire, sir, when you did that?
This happened began in 2007.
Okay, so it's unrelated to the matter. We are inquiring into matters which occurred between 1978 going to 1980. Several years have passed. And I would just like to ask you this as a minister of religion. What is your view in relation to reconciliation and forgiveness at this time in relation to the things that occurred between 1978 and 80, particularly as they affected you?
Well, I have written recent times. I'm trying to remember the time span, but in the article I written on the statement, I have forgiven those persons. Those persons who have done me wrong, I have forgiven them. In 1992, I was interviewed by a journalist, a Guyanese journalist, and in that interview he asked me, he said, if the government changes with the coming election, would you be glad to see these persons be brought to justice? And my response then was, to do that would cause Guyanese to suffer greater suffering than they have gone through during the period 70 and 79 and 80. But it went right up to 85.
Thank you very much. Are you aware of investigation carried out by jurors from the International Court of Justice in relation to the events leading up to Dr. Rodney's death?
No,
International Commission.
not in relationship to Dr. Rodney's death. But after I left the country, I went to the United Nations representative in Barbados. And after they had obtained sufficient evidence for me, and they had correlated that evidence with them, they sent on that information to Geneva, and the Geneva Human Rights Association classified me as a refugee, and as a refugee, myself and my boys received money to pay our rent and our upkeep from the United Nations.
Thank you very much, Reverend Gilbert. I have no further questions. All the very best to you.
Thank you, God bless you.
You were asked about the ombudsman. I seem to recall the name. Mr. Justice Van Sertima was appointed ombudsman very early by 1974, 75. Does that help you? Maybe before, but I seem to remember that period he was in ombudsman.
I remember going to the ombudsman, but I don't think I could recall.
Okay.
The promises not to be too long.
Yes, yes.
Yes, I think you just want to put that way.
Yeah.
The program doesn't
March 6, 1970. Are you aware that in 68, the National Security Miscellaneous Provisions Act was passed? And was it effective operation again?
Not when I came back, I was not aware of that. But I remember reading something later on of the suspension of there was some writing somewhere that I read in the newspaper, the suspension of the Constitution or something.
Freedom of association, and the right, you could not associate like that because of the race rights that you had, because of the killings that you had during that the period immediately preceding passage of that. In fact, in the independence came during the state of emergency, isn't that so?
Yes, and that was also carried on.
And therefore, the police was applying that act. The police was applying that act against persons who were breaching the laws. You agree with that?
Well, now that you have mentioned that, it's now come to me that the breaking up of the battlefields perhaps had some relation.
So you agree that the breaking up of the meetings by the police, according to you, we don't accept that. You say it has something to do with applying the law on that act.
Maybe because of the suspension that was put in place.
Are you aware that act was enforced even in 1980?
1980?
Yes.
No, I wouldn't.
No? Are you aware that many of your colleagues, many of the WPA leaders were variously arrested under the provisions of that act?
I know arrests were made, but I can't say for sure under what act.
And that act allowed the police, on reasonable suspicion, to enter homes and search for ammunition. Isn't that so?
Well, could have been.
Search for wanted people. That's all I would ask you now. That would be better.
We've allowed your council today to make sure that we absolutely refer the place to court. The opportunity now.
Reverend Gilbert, I have only one question for you. Are you aware that this particular act was repealed for being adverse to the provisions of the Constitution?
I would surmise that with the coming of the new government in 1992, that was probably removed.
At this time, members of the Commission, we don't have no further questions for Reverend Gilbert.
That is not true, Mr. Chairman. We can't allow as a council in this society that answer this time. That act was repealed by the PNC president, Mr. Hugh Desmond, when he was president. And we cannot allow that to stand. In fact, in 1980, that act was still alive.
Yes, take a note, please look at me. Please put before that the candidate is victim right. So now I want to thank you. Thank you. Gilbert, thank you very much for sharing with us over the last 2 days. Yes, I appreciate that. We're not at your best. I hope that we work better thereafter.
Thank you so much.
Very much appreciate your comment and sharing your experience. Thank you. Yes, if you make more, you're free to do so. Commissioner Thompson, next.
We hope to continue where we left off with the evidence of Edward Rodney.
Is he here?
He is here and ready to review.
Please bring him to the stand.
Chair is going to call for break. therefore for a break.
Edward Rodney. Thank you. We are proposing to continue your testimony. In whose hands were you when you left the stand last? You Commission Council, as I recall, will still question you, and you will continue in a minute. Perhaps you should take me home again, given that some days will elapse, you're still on the road, but perhaps you should take me home formally again.
Mr. Rodney, that you shall give this answer shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Mr. Rodney, before I begin, I think when we stopped, I was going through some of the terms of reference. And we were at that part, we were in that term, which has to do with the actions and activities of the state, such as the Guyana Police Force, the Guyana Defense Force, the Guyana National Service, and the Guyana People's Militia. I believe that you have spoken about the Guyana Police Force, the House of Israel, and the YSL. So my question to you is whether you are aware of any activities of the state in relation to the Guyana Defense Force in 1978, 1979, 1998, with particular attention to whether they were tasked with surveillance against the political or any other action against the political opposition. So with regards to GDF, are you aware of them being involved in any actions or activities against the political opposition?
Before you start, though, are you referring to the House of Israel as an institution of the state?
I never refer to them as such, but I do believe that it was mentioned by the witness.
Oh, you gave me the impression that you so classified it.
I'm sorry if I did that.
Okay.
It was during the time when we were questioned on that term of reference that these bodies came into play. Yes, in relation to the GDF, are you aware of any activities during those years that have as relevance?
Reverend Council, before I answer that question, I would just like to try to take the facts. When I gave my evidence 2 days, I did refer to police action, answer to Commissioner Finance. You can ask the question of controlling crowds. And my answer was based on 2 parts. One was reported in the media. The other was just what I made that clarification. The part that was not reported was that the police were under constraint at times because they operated large crowds, heavily dedicated. That was not reported. I just thought I would let that be recorded. The other thing which I think I need to clarify.
Sorry, I didn't get it last.
Operated with
A measure of constraint.
in this side way.
Highly dedicated. In other words, there were lots of crowded people, and the police really could not draw their weapons if you like.
Yeah, you said that already.
I know, but I'm saying it again because it was not reported in the media.
I don't want the wrong impression to begin. The other thing, and I think this is a major lapse, nothing to do with council or the commissioners. It was reported that I first met Gregory Smith at a WPA meeting, but it was not a WPA meeting, it was a WPVP meeting. Those are the two clarifications I want to make, if you could recall. It was not a WPA meeting, it was a WPVP.
No. And what does that acronym mean?
It means Working People's Standard Party. Working People's Standard Party. Now, in answer to your question,
Did you hear?
now, when I returned to Guyana, that was one of the first persons I met. There were people we could describe as cable was myself. Same age group, if you like. And I recall a meeting in Leopold Street at GDF Sergeant. Well, he was very friendly. We discussed things. He told me a little bit about where I think he was stationed. And then I'm not quite certain what he was, Camp Stevenson. But there was nothing untoward. It was just like a normal exchange, discussion. That was the first encounter that would have been in 72. However, as time wore on, especially as the situation in the country deteriorated, and as I had to, from time to time, as I explained earlier, speak at political meetings of the WPVP, not the WPA. I would have to go as part of my duties and assignments to the Redan station to uplift police permission to hold a public meeting and to use a loudspeaker set. Sometimes you got to commit to the loudspeaker set at the same time. At other times you have to go back to get the loudspeaking equipment permit and the permission to hold a public meeting. This is a political meeting during the period of 74, 73. And I would see GDF persons around the down precincts. But again, there was no conflict situation between myself and these GDF persons. Other times, we would see GDF ranks, 5, 6 ranks of 12 persons moving along the street. But again, no conflict with the GDF.
Could we try to direct the activities in the years 1978, 79, if you are aware of it, if you're not, you can go on about.
So let us move from 74 to 78, 79. The only direct contact I had with the GDF or GDF personnel at that time would have been when there were strikes, industrial disputes leading to strikes. And where I worked at Monreco, agriculture station, GDF personnel will come in Bedford trucks and they will load up equipment, load up plants, load up tarpaulins, because most likely they were connected to agricultural work wherever the GDF had the stations. However, from time to time also, you will be sitting in a bar or a drinking place or a cafe, and the GDF patrols will come around and say, what are you doing there? They will attack you. But they were part and parcel of GDF patrols whenever there were industrial strikes.
You would have that personal experience?
Personal experience.
And we're speaking about the Guyana Defense Force?
Guyana Defense, yes.
GPF sometimes sounds like GDF. So I want to make sure that you make a differentiation. Anything else on the GDF? GDF. 1779 in terms of carrying out the actions or surveillance on behalf of the state against the political opposition.
Well, one long issue, and I don't want to assume anything. Please do. I don't want to assume anything further.
Do you know anything about about the Guyana National Service or the Guyana People's Militia during those years, 78, 79, 80?
Again, only from observation, because to be truthful, one never really got close to these arms or these paramilitary arms if one was cognizant of the political situation.
So, will it be true to say then that you are unaware of any activities by the National Service or People's Militia personnel during those years that you may have construed as activities carried out on behalf of the state against the political opposition? Would that be correct? You're unaware?
It would be correct, yes. I would like to assure you, even though I may have my own impressions at the time, but to come here and say definitely no.
Now, if you could move out of
What sex perception evidence to that effect?
yes.
Using the environment, you develop perception, sex perception.
But if it is that you have some opinions to offer on activities of any of those, any of the state apparatus, the Commission would like to hear about.
Well, there was one incident which I think perhaps
Give us the basis of the perception. Yes. Once we have the basis, we can determine what to adapt to.
during the course of 1979, there was a particular incident where a resident of Betafawaki, UP, was murdered. I'm not certain whether it would be before or after July of that year. However, and for the want of being precise, he was an Afro-Guyanese who was killed. Apparently, he was making his way from the area of Boston Falls to where he resided in BP. And according to what the investigation revealed, a group of vigilantes surrounded him, and he was found later the next day dead. I think if I recall correctly, there were 15 persons altogether who were arrested. This is in the newspapers. I happen to know at least 3 of those persons who you could describe as being supporters, close supporters of the DPP. The others, however, I didn't know them, but I see them in and around Monrepo area. One particular one, however, struck me as being someone who could be described as a very military type person, a very influential type person amongst this peer group. Later on, I got to find out that that person was seconded to work at Monrepo as a kind of enforcer. But by that I mean, I gave my evidence earlier and I explained how my activities there included trying to organize these workers into a trade union, GAU. However, there were other activists loyal to the ruling party who did not want this. They wanted the workers to join a union led by someone called Silo Baichan. Now, Silo Baichan at the time was the leader of another trade union. And Silo Baichan's union's personnel had infiltrated the area where these persons who I knew resided, ostensibly to provide them with vigilante services. Immediately the time after I read this piece, I realized that the enforcer working in the unit of Monrepo Agricultural Station had influenced ordinary workers to form a vigilante policing group, and that this vigilante policing group was then accused of killing this person from Libya. And I think immediately after, there was a statement by WPA, and I think UC COI himself warned the people not to be misled, not to fall into the same trap as years ago when one person from one ethnic group was killed and it was being alleged that another ethnic group did it. because most likely they understood that that person had not been murdered under normal circumstances. In other words, it was a political case. That's the point I want to make. And that, as far as I'm aware, was done by persons in out of uniform. So we could say for certain that it was a GDF person. What we do know is that the enforcer working in the unit, just like how they had also victims, elements working in country code, was responsible for organizing this vigilante group. And it was this vigilante group that was alleged to have killed the young resident. I just thought I would relate that. And this is something that I know about.
The person you are referring to as the enforcer, you know the name of that person?
I can't recall the name. But I do know that he was very active in the union led by Socio-political.
You don't know the name of that person?
I'll try and recollect. It's not a difficult, it still exists, but I'll try and recollect.
Do you have any other opinions about the political, social, economic atmosphere that was in existence through those years, 17, 17,
Well, not very much different from what has been recounted last by other witnesses. I refer to earlier shortages.
If it is that you agree with what some other witnesses say or disagree with them, we'd like to hear about it.
No, what I'm saying is that there were shortages, there were searches, there was intimidation, and there was what's normally called fight back. Fight back meaning people resisting, either because of Rodney, or because of the DPP, or because of their own violation. People are people, so they were fighting back against the dictatorship, but in muted and different forms. Normally called class struggle. People, you know.
Your opinion was that class struggle. Your opinion was that in 1779 there was a dictatorship.
Yes, there was.
1778. And every dictatorship has a dictator. What was who was the dictator?
Well, you know, one has to be careful because if you were to go and compare it this way, it would mislead. The dictatorship that was existing in Guyana was a kind of hybrid. It was part Latin American, Caribbean, of the strategic type, and part, if you like, an administrative dictatorship. It was not the kind of dictatorship you find in Asia, like Marcos, or in Africa, like Mobutu, or Sayam. It wasn't that kind of dictatorship. It was an administrative, political, multiracial dictatorship. It was different. It had to be defined. It had its own peculiarities then. So we couldn't apply it from dictatorship just on down. You had to look specifically to see what the traits were and what was specific to the Burnham dictatorship compared to others.
When you captured one, they mentioned
Administrative political dictatorship. Administrative meaning.
that's meant to be one or two.
But people say administrative slash forward. In other words, it used the constitution, it used laws, it used amendments, it used terror. It combined things that other dictatorships do not do, or do not tend to do.
Now, I think you've said to us already that you were the eldest of the Rodney siblings, which included Walter Rodney. I'd like to expand a little bit on your relationship with Walter Rodney. Would you describe your relationship with him as being close in 1978, 1978?
I would say it was close. Close in the sense that I could reach him. I could reach him if I went to school. I could reach him if he stopped in the street and he stopped. I would reach him also at meetings or at press conferences. But in terms of discussing, in terms of being in a regular, everyday communication. It wasn't that close, but it was close enough, given the constraints that existed at the time.
Did your brother Walter share feelings with you on a regular basis in 78, 79, 98?
Well, yes, he did, but to be truthful, these interactions mainly would come about when we gave political classes or lessons. I would go sit in at the lessons or the classes. For example, at Linden, there were a number of discussions with workers. I would travel there with him. And whilst on the way coming back, we would discuss. But those occasions were very few, if you what I'm getting at. So the interaction was at a political nature, rather than just sit and talk as brothers do. Because he was very much involved in what he was doing. And very little time, or relatively little time, to discuss brother things like that. But he did inquire from time to time, how are you doing? What's the state of your health? Can I help? Things like that.
No,
He was essentially a political person.
did Walter ever share with you any information regarding his own safety?
Indirectly, yes. Indirectly. Indirectly, yes.
Did Walter ever tell you that he had enemies that may want to cause him physical harm?
But again, he will say that openly. I mean, it was out there that people were saying things, people were doing things, especially after Father Dark's murder. After Father Dark's murder, we both stood in the Grand Cathedral Christian surround. Whilst the cortege, whilst the ceremony was going on, he was standing next to him. And he made it very clear that this was it. Both myself and him, both of us were different. He didn't distinguish between myself and him at that level, especially after Father Dark's failure.
Did he give you an idea as to who he felt may have wanted to cause him harm?
No, he didn't say, he didn't mention individual names. No individual names. But, we both had a certain amount of political consciousness. We both have been exposed to certain kinds of, if you like, crisis situations. Therefore, he didn't say, well, that man down the street may want to kill you. He didn't say that. Because he knew he could tell me that. He expected me to understand that this was a situation during the front line.
Other than him having political enemies, are you aware of him having any other sort of enemy? Did he have any, for instance, did you know of him having any personal differences with anybody outside of politics?
Not really. Not really. However, this cannot be ruled out. I don't know the way. This cannot be ruled out. That you had enemies outside of the politics. But another way.
I believe you said to us also that the family grew up in Penn Street, and this I think would be the working class area. May I please ask you whether you have a good working knowledge of that area of the city that comprises working class and working people?
Yes, I have a very comprehensive idea of working class, in the sense that I grew up there. And from time to time, as we growing up, we would have encounters, cricket matches, that street would be happy.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I suppose there's a danger of having this recycling. We've covered all these things with them. In fact, we've been to spend a long time doing that. By having clear each street, each area, instead of the family lived around that workforce area,
I'm attempting to lay the foundation for a physical map to be produced for everyone's benefit, so that perhaps this witness will look at that map and point out various areas of interest relevant to this area. So the next question that I want to ask is whether you would be able to point out on a map of the area, areas such as the Georgetown Prison, the Rodney House, and such.
Yes, I would.
Now you mentioned briefly Gregory Smith to us. Do you have any idea where Gregory Smith? Do you have knowledge of any house that Gregory Smith would have occupied in 1978, 79,
Only subsequent to the incident, where
Which incident?
June the 13th, 1980, when Walter was assassinated. Only after that. And I realized that I used to pass regularly, almost twice a week, if not more, the area of Russell Street, proceeding from Broad Street to Link Street, or Broad Street to Hull Street, and then on to Princess Street. And that apartment actually was an apartment where Freddie's been lived. Before that, I had absolutely no idea that was even.
But you would be able to point out that place on a map,
I
if you
would
were sure?
Yes.
How did you come to know that Gregory Smith had at one time occupied the place you're speaking about?
It appeared in the newspapers. Pakistan carried it, I think Mirror carried it, the paper carried it, and there were a number of images of the building that made at that time.
And are you aware of anyone denying publicly that that in fact was that apartment that you get
I'm
occupied?
not aware of that.
Would you be able to point out such a map, the area where the explosion allegedly occurred on the 3rd of June 1980?
Yes, I would.
Would you be able to point out such a map, a house at 45 Broad Street, which I believe functioned as a WPA building at the time?
That may prove a little difficult because I only got to know that the street location years after. I didn't know him.
I'm very that you had given evidence earlier with regards to the period when you were incarcerated and about the morning after that period.
If I may, the union, and referred to earlier, it's Union of Agricultural Allied Workers, UAA.
This is the union that was headed by the name
Called AU.
UAAW would call it that. UAA. Union of Agriculture or Agricultural and Allied Workers.
I wish to withdraw the last question. Before I forget, I want to speak to you. You mentioned that many of your interactions with Walter Rodney were when you were physically present with him, as opposed to, I didn't hear you mention that you spoke to him on the telephone. Can you tell us what you did in fact to speak to him on the telephone from time to time?
Well, very rare to be truthful. Because at that time, the catchment area or catchment areas for GT&T telephones, as opposed to the other telephones, did not include many of the scheme areas, called scheme areas. That's West Rumpel, West Pendleton,